Welcome to the Healthy Skin Show with Jennifer Fugo, where we're flipping everything you've been told about your chronic skin issues upside down and connecting you with alternative solutions your dermatologist never told you about.
Welcome back to episode number 101 of the Healthy Skin Show. In today's episode, I want to talk about the connection that I've been reading up on and investigating between psoriasis and thyroid problems. I've got some interesting research to highlight today, but first I want to start with a story. The story of my client named Tina. And of course, her name isn't really Tina, but for our episode today, it will work because, of course, I always want to protect the identity of the clients with whom I work. Tina is an amazing client, but she's been struggling with psoriasis for quite a long while. And eventually, her psoriasis and her symptoms became so unbearable that she sought out help. She was struggling with extreme fatigue, constantly feeling like she was on edge. She was incredibly itchy, super depressed. Her mood was all over the place, and she really couldn't sleep. A lot because she was itchy all the time, but just generally she was just really not feeling great. And so one of the first questions that I would pose to any client is, have you had your thyroid levels checked? Most people, when they come to me about their skin issues, their focus is solely on their skin. But as you've listened to the Healthy Skin Show and you've read through skinterrupt.com, you've come to realize that there are so many other pieces of the puzzle that need to be put together. And sometimes your skin issue may not really truly be a skin issue. It could be rooted in something else. Or there's something else underlying it that's driving the symptoms forward. That's what we're always looking for. In this particular instance, getting thyroid levels checked for Tina was a game changer. Her thyroid stimulating hormone level, which is also known as TSH, came back in the 30s. Now, that might not mean anything to you, but according to the American Thyroid Association, the normal range is between 0.4 and 4.0. She was in the 30s. And according to functional medicine, they look at a tighter range of optimal TSH being between 1 and 2. So you can see from this that her TSH was incredibly high. That's why I urged her to go back and see her doctor immediately to get the test results reviewed and ultimately talk to the doctor about the possibility of medication to help support her thyroid levels. Because when your TSH is elevated, it oftentimes can indicate a state of hypothyroidism. And if there are antibodies present, that can indicate a state of autoimmunity. But ultimately, that diagnosis has to be made by a doctor. Tina had just assumed that a lot of her symptoms were the result of all the itchiness and the psoriatic symptoms that she was experiencing, or that she was reacting to food. And she had been on a really extensive elimination diet and had even gone vegan for a period of time in hopes of getting the psoriasis and all of these symptoms to stop. Initially, they got better, but then they totally took a nosedive and everything got a lot worse. Upon seeing her doctor, the doctor decided that some thyroid replacement hormone would be helpful. It was started immediately, and within a month, Tina was feeling significantly better. Not 100%, but a real significant improvement in energy. She was able to sleep through the night. She felt calmer, less on edge. And with all the psoriasis clients that I work with, it really got me thinking about a potential connection between psoriasis and thyroid issues. So I began digging into the research, and today I'd like to share with you two pieces of research that help to illuminate why, if you've got psoriasis or even psoriatic arthritis, getting a full thyroid workup, including an ultrasound from your doctor, is really critical on an annual or every other year basis. The first piece of research that I think is worth sharing is from a retrospective study done by a doctor and his colleagues who went back and looked at the Taiwanese National Health Insurance Research Database and came up with 162,842 psoriatic patients between the years of 2000 and 2011. All of these patients were then matched with non-psoriasis controls. One of the papers that I found that discusses this study drew a really interesting conclusion that I felt was worth noting. Quote, "This study illustrates that patients suffering from psoriasis have an increased risk of developing autoimmune thyroid disease. The risk increases if the patients are also suffering from psoriatic arthritis. The study's results reaffirm the complexity of systemic inflammation in psoriasis and reminds clinicians of association between psoriatic patients and thyroid morbidity." End quote. The second piece of research was a year-long case-controlled study with 56 psoriasis patients that were matched to 54 controls. They evaluated every patient extensively on their thyroid, including thyroid-stimulating hormone, known as TSH, free thyroxine, or free T4, anti-thyroid peroxidase antibodies, also known as TPO antibodies, and anti-thyroglobulin antibodies. They also performed thyroid ultrasounds on every single person in order to compare them to the control group. The results were pretty eye-opening. The study stated that, quote, "significantly higher prevalence of TPO antibodies, thyroglobulin antibodies, hypoechogenicity, pseudonodularity, and increased vascularity was found in patients with psoriasis," end quote. The data itself was quite interesting. For example, when it came to looking at the difference between the incidence of TPO antibodies between those with psoriasis and those in the control group, they found that 25% of those with psoriasis had TPO antibodies, whereas only 9.3% in the control group did. With thyroglobulin antibodies, 30.4% in the psoriatic group had them, versus 11.1% of the control group. Ultimately, the researchers concluded that, quote, "this study demonstrates a clear association between psoriasis and Hashimoto's thyroiditis in the form of a significantly higher prevalence of TPO antibodies, thyroglobulin antibodies, hypoechogenicity, pseudonodularity, and increased vascularity. Hence, thyroid evaluation by anti-thyroid antibodies, particularly TPO antibodies, and ultrasound should be included in the care of psoriasis patients," end quote. So in listening to all of this, it's making me wonder if you're thinking to yourself, gee, I never had my thyroid checked. No doctor ever told me this. Well, it's a perfect opportunity to do so. And you can actually get your thyroid checked by asking your doctor to run a full thyroid panel, or you can go online in most states of the United States and purchase your own full thyroid panel to then have a practitioner evaluate it for you and help you understand what your best next steps are. Just so you know, a full thyroid panel includes TSH, or thyroid stimulating hormone, free T4, free T3, TPO antibodies that were mentioned in the previous studies, as well as thyroglobulin antibodies. There was some indication from some of the studies that I read of a connection between hyperthyroidism and psoriasis, so it may be wise to ask your doctor to also run a TSI. It stands for the thyroid-stimulating immunoglobulins that oftentimes is connected with Graves' or hyperthyroidism. And last but not least, an ultrasound of your thyroid. One of the reasons that I look at the entire thyroid feedback loop is because your thyroid's function is heavily based upon nutrients. For example, thyroid hormone is predominantly built on tyrosine, which is an amino acid, and iodine, and we also need selenium, iron, magnesium, vitamin A, and zinc to help support this entire process. So the big takeaways here are that if you have psoriasis or psoriatic arthritis, your thyroid levels should be checked by your doctor or your practitioner in order to make sure that we're not having another issue in that whole department, because your thyroid absolutely impacts the health of your skin. If you feel uncomfortable asking your doctor for these tests, you can certainly go online and in most states order the entire thyroid panel yourself and then share the results with your practitioner. If you'd like to also share the studies that I've discussed, you can head on over to the show notes at skinterrupt.com/101, where you'll find links directly to the research that you can print out and bring it to your doctor's attention. If you've got any questions or comments, you can also leave them there so that way we can keep the conversation going. And no matter whether you're tuning in for the first time or you've been tuning in for a while, make sure that you've rated the podcast, shared a review of what you think of the show, and hit the subscribe button. That way, the next episode will land on your mobile device of choice without you having to do a thing. And if you know anyone who's struggling with their psoriasis, share this episode with them. It's highly likely that they've never been told to get their thyroid checked and probably never even thought about it. If your thyroid is out of whack, it can absolutely impact not just your skin, but your mood, your body in general, and so many different processes that help you feel well. That's why this is so critical. And as always, I appreciate you tuning in. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.